Hey people, welcome to the Run Testers. It's Kieran here. I've got something really exciting for you. I have been busy testing this shoe, one of the first people to get it in the UK. This is the Under Armour Velociti Elite. It's Under Armour's first carbon plated shoe. It's designed for chasing PBs over the 26.2 mile distance, so it's a marathon carbon race shoe. I've put well over 100 miles in it, including a marathon test, and I'm here in this video to tell you whether or not this is any good and how it stacks up against the other carbon shoe competition. So watch on in the video to find out how I rate the Under Armour Velociti Elite. So some quick key details then. Well, the Under Armour Velociti Elite has a stack height of 39 mils in the heel and 31 mils in the forefoot for a drop of 8 millimeters. It's going to cost you $250 in the US or £220 in the UK. It weighs in 238 grams or 8.4 ounces in a UK men's size 8.5. And this shoe will go on sale on April the 8th. Let's take a closer look at the design then. Like the New Balance Super Comp Elite V3 and also the Saucony Endorphin Pro 3, I think this shoe actually has a little bit more of a streamlined look. It's got a little bit more of a traditional silhouette. It's not got that kind of screaming kind of super shoe thing that you get with the Alphafly, which to a certain extent I think is a good thing. You know, as carbon plate super shoes go, it's pretty compact and it's pretty subtle. Now there's a pretty familiar kind of carbon shoe, super shoe story to tell here. You've basically got a full length carbon plate that's sandwiched between two different types of midsole foam. So closer to your foot on top, you've got a cushioned but springy Pebax foam layer. Underneath there's a wedge of Under Armour's new softer, lighter, critical flow foam. So also inside here you've got a TPE sock liner. It's not very thick, it's quite a thin one, but that's there to basically put a little bit more cushioning protection and a little bit more spring inside the shoe itself. Flip them over and the outsole is really interesting. Like the Under Armour Velociti Wind 2, the supercritical flow foam that you've got here is strong and durable enough so that it doesn't need to have an outsole layer of rubber. That's what Under Armour says anyway. It's cut instead, so the idea is that you save weight by having that bit of the midsole and the outsole as one kind of unit. There is no extra layer of rubber here. More on whether or not that actually works for durability later on in the video. Despite dropping the outsole, the Under Armour Velociti Elite still comes in as one of the heavier carbon race shoes, and it's cut in the same bracket as the Nike Alphafly and also the Adidas Primex, strung close to those shoes than it is to something like the Vaporfly or the Adios Pro 3. Now up top, the Velociti features a very light and minimal Warp 2 mesh upper. It's one of those that's got that kind of sort of almost plasticky feel rather than a fabric feel. It's got strategically placed horizontal tapes here that provide the structure and the support. You've got a lightly padded tongue. It's got just a little bit of padding where the laces land, so that sort of helps prevent any of that kind of lace pinch. It sort of wraps the foot, although it does roll up a little bit. It doesn't go sort of right round the top of the foot, but it's a more kind of thin foot wrapping tongue rather than any of those kind of thick padded things that you get. You've got a balanced amount of heel cushioning in the heel collar. It's not overdone, but it's very different to, you know, those strategic pads that you'll see placed in things like the Alphafly. It kind of has a traditional kind of heel padding that runs right the way around. And in terms of the shaping of that heel collar, you know, it's one of those that's sort of slightly more narrow into that, and you've got a heel counter that's coming up the back here to give you a little bit of extra support and hold in the heel. When it comes to fit, I ran in a UK 8.5 and I would recommend going true to size. I found it easy to get a comfortable fit with reliable laced lockdown, good heel hold. The heel padding is balanced and comfortable, nicely unfussy too, stays where you want it to stay. So the Velociti Elite has a racy feel, but it doesn't hug as tight as and as snug across the top of the foot as many of the other kind of carbon races like the Alphafly. It's not quite that kind of tight locked in booty fit. It's a little bit more open, a little bit more breathable, a bit more kind of traditional in terms of a standard running shoe in that sense. You know, it's much roomier than the Alphafly or the New Balance Super Comp Elite. There's a decent amount of toe box wiggle room, and that's brilliant when it comes to kind of doing those marathon distances. No trouble at all in terms of black toenailing up the end there. There's plenty of room across the top and into the toe box. So I'd recommend going true to size in these. So in testing, I've run more than 100 miles in the Under Armour Velociti Elite, and that included a 3.5 hour solo marathon test where I mixed up the miles from easy to marathon pace. I've also clocked some 10-mile efforts that also mix slower and faster paces. I've done a handful of tempo 10Ks, and I've also done some all-out 5K efforts to test that kind of top speed and more than a little bit of plodding around, very easy to see how it is when you're not moving quite so fast or so well. Now, first thing to say that the comfort on the foot of this shoe is great. They disappear really nicely. It's very easy to get them laced down in a comfortable fit, get that hold, and you know, this is a shoe that kind of disappears off the foot and lets you get on with business and run nice and easy. Now, from the moment you've got them on the foot, from the very start, they are noticeably firmer, less lively, less energetic, less kind of wobbly, less of that kind of real kind of springy kind of feeling even when you're walking around them than a lot of the other carbon sort of super shoes that are out there on the market right now. Although they are still lively, there's definitely a much more kind of subtle kind of spring and a more subtle ride to these shoes. What you're going to get here is something that is a lot more direct than something like the Alpha Fly. Now, if you prefer more ground feel in your kind of race shoes, then that's a good thing, because this is going to give you ground feel quite a lot more than those shoes. But if you're looking for something that's got that really kind of lively ping, the same as the Nike and the Adidas kind of racers, then it's not really quite there with this Under Armour Velociti Elite. Now, what I really think that means for this shoe is that it moves best when you're running faster paces over shorter distances with a really nice locked in form. I think that kind of slight firmness to the shoe really encourages kind of a faster foot turnover. And though I think the transitions are kind of snappy enough, it just lacks a bit of that crucial kick that you get from shoes like the Alpha Fly. And that becomes crucial over the marathon distance, where when you need that bit of help, from a shoe that might kind of either delay when the fatigue is going to kick in, or when the fatigue does kick in, it's just giving you that little bit of extra energy, that little bit of extra pop in your step that can help you through those last kind of crucial miles. Over the marathon test that I did, the Under Armour Velociti Elite just didn't quite have that same delivery that some of those shoes do. Now, that firmness, I think, really told over the marathon distance. Even as someone who likes to run in firmer shoes, I think the firmness really kind of told towards the end, into the sort of last kind of hour. I did a 3.5 hour marathon test in this, and beyond the kind of 20-mile mark, when I really needed it, I was digging, it was hurting when I did it. I just wanted this shoe to give me a little bit more, and it wasn't really there. You're still having to do quite a lot of the work. I wanted a little bit more cushioning, I wanted a little bit more protection, I wanted a little bit more energy back. And I was finding towards the end of that, as I got a bit more ragged, a bit more heavy in my footstep, I found the impact coming up from the road was just a little bit more pronounced than I would really want. So from the marathon test, my takeaway really was that I'm just not sure they're going to offer the same kind of cushioning protection that many runners will want. People who might be used to running in something that has a little bit more softness. I think, if you like the Endorphin Pro 3, I think you get a little bit more softness from that. I think even the Alpha Fly gives you a little bit more softness. You're not necessarily going to get that with this Velociti Elite. It maybe is a little bit closer to the directness of something like the Vaporfly Next Percent 2. So if you're used to running in that shoe, I think that gives you a little bit more. It's a bit lighter, it's a bit more stripped back, it's a bit more racy, it's a bit more punchy than this shoe. But there's kind of a similarity in terms of that overall kind of ground feel, I think. However, I think there's a flip to this, and it's something that I think some people will benefit from. What you lose in that overall kind of springiness and some of that kind of wobbliness that comes with the interaction of the foam and the carbon plate and some of the super shoes, you get back in the Velociti Elite in stability. This has got a really, really stable ride. I found it anyway. It's got a nice kind of reliable platform to run off, and it's consistent all the way through. And that really comes into its own when the form does get ragged. So although you're not getting that extra bit of help from the propulsion, you are at least having something that if you fall back a little bit on your heels, you have got a platform that is going to be consistent from first to last mile. That said, the Under Armour Velociti Elite, as I alluded to, is definitely happier, I think, on those tempo 10Ks and those sort of guns blazing 5Ks that I ran, where the cushioning or the lack of sort of that longer run cushioning matters kind of less. And there's definitely kind of an agility and kind of a nimble feel to this that, I even took it onto the track, and I think it did a pretty good job on sort of shorter, faster sort of track sessions. Opens this shoe up, I think, to doing interval sessions as well. Now, if you're someone who's going to go out for kind of racing 5Ks with really, really serious intent, there are better shoes, and you're probably going to choose those sort of lighter, more racy shoes over the top of this one. But this can do a job. And if you're someone who's looking for one shoe that can do kind of a gamut of different kind of training paces, right down from those kind of shorter 800-meter intervals right up to running a training sort of progression half marathon, then I think the Under Armour Flow Velociti Elite can do that. Now, if I'm going to compare this to some other shoes, I think this is like a firmer version of a Saucony Endorphin Pro. The Pro has a little bit more softness, a little bit more protection longer into the miles, but in terms of the more kind of subtle, balanced kind of feel of that kind of sort of combination of the plate and the cushioning, I think this is somewhat similar, a bit firmer. It's also kind of in there, I think, with something like the New Balance Super Comp version 3, Elite version 3, which, I think that shoe is actually a little bit poppier. The trade-off for that, I think, is that you get a little bit more room in the Under Armour. I think the uppers and the whole overall kind of fit across the shoe is a little bit more comfortable for me. I found the Super Comp Elite just maybe a little bit sort of too hugging and a little bit too tight. Now, it's certainly not up there with the punch of an Alpha Fly. I wouldn't sort of necessarily choose this over an Alpha Fly to go and race a marathon, even though Under Armour's got this pegged as a marathon race shoe. The fact that this is a slightly more subtle ride, I think, opens up maybe a different use case for the shoe. And though Under Armour has pegged this as a marathon PB chasing shoe. I think it's a much more kind of capable shoe that maybe even slips back into kind of daily training territory, or even kind of racing up to a half marathon. And this is a kind of shoe where, because it's not quite as aggressive, I think you can probably do more kind of general weekly miles in it when you're looking to do things that are a little bit more kind of top pace. So I'm talking about those kind of tempo runs, and even those sort of progression runs, even some of the faster, longer sort of marathon training runs, but not when you're going over 2 hours. This is a shoe that I think can hold its own in those. So there is some versatility here that may well mean it makes it a sort of reasonable rotation shoe, but from another perspective rather than just going all out marathon chasing. Now I want to do a quick word on durability too. Obviously the main thing here you're looking at is that fact that it's got no outsole rubber. How is that sort of borne out after 100 miles? Well, the majority of the shoe here is showing absolutely no signs of wear at all. One area where you can see there is a little bit scuffing up in an impact zone on the outside there of the heel, but there is, it looks like there's a little bit of creasing to that bottom section of the supercritical foam. But overall, in the main impact zones up front, this is fine. It looks strong and solid. And as if I think about how the Velociti Wind held up, that was a shoe that sort of lasted lots and lots of miles. And I think that this shoe will have pretty much the same kind of levels of durability as that. And I think you'll get good mileage out of this shoe. And as super shoes go, I think it's going to be one of the more durable. Verdict then, well, there's loads of positives here about the Under Armour Flow Velociti Elite. Good uppers, comfortable disappearing fit, great stability. It's light, it's agile, it's nimble, but there is a but here. If you're looking for the punchiest marathon race shoe, I don't think this is it. The firmer supercritical flow foam, I think, lacks the propulsive ride that we've come to expect from other carbon plate marathon racers. And that firmer bit ride definitely won't be to everyone's liking, particularly at mile 22 of a marathon, as I found out. I'd say this shoe is much better suited to shorter, faster runs, or for anyone looking for a more direct, stable, subtle kind of super shoe option. Now, for me, this is another one where Under Armour has produced a good but not great shoe. I think this is by far my favourite Under Armour running shoe that I've ever run in. It's definitely a huge step in the right direction. It's a shoe that, is very, very capable, if not leading the pack. And my tip to you is, when this inevitably drops in price at some point in the future, this shoe will be a great shoe to have in your rotation as kind of a versatile option for a whole different range of paces. But when you're going to run the marathon, there are other shoes I would still pick to race in. But as an all-round kind of good durability, versatile, fast training shoe, I think the Under Armour Velociti Elite has some real good credentials. So there you have it. That has been my review of the brand new Under Armour Velociti Elite. I hope you've enjoyed it. As ever, any questions, hit us up in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Please ring the bell, because if you ring the bell, you'll get to hear when other videos come up. And being notified about all the other great shoe reviews we've got coming up. Loads of carbon shoes landing, loads of head-to-heads. We'll be looking at how this shoe compares to lots of the other kind of super shoes by testing them out side by side. And in the meantime, if you would like a little bit more detail about how the Under Armour Velociti Elite coped over the marathon distance, I've done a full marathon test video, which is up on the channel right here. Now go and check that one out, have a watch of that, and see me suffering towards the end of 22 miles of this test. Otherwise, it's been fantastic to talk to you, and I hope you've enjoyed the video. As ever, thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon on the Run Testers.